Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC Fight Night, Holm versus Vieira. We'll just go into it. Okay, I got the scorecards. I finished the fight. First honorable mention. Mishap. First and only injustice on the card. I know maybe some people are probably like, hey, there's a bunch of split decisions on this card. There should be a lot of injustices. No, not in my opinion. There's only one injustice. There's only one pure robbery on this card, and that's Holm versus Vieira. Let's start off from the top. So, my scorecard, 48-47 for Holm. I gave Holm a 10-9 in the first, the third, and the fifth round. Okay. In that very first round, okay, Holm outstruck Vieira. Boom. Second round. Close round on the feet, but Vieira got a takedown and had a submission attempt. That's her round. Third round, Holm outstruck Vieira. Mostly clinch strikes. I think that seems to be the theme of this, is that most of this fight was in the clinch. Oh, a lot of this fight was in the clinch. Mostly clinch strikes by Holm, but she outstruck her well enough to win that round. Fourth round, Vieira outstruck Holm. Here's the thing about that fourth round, though, is maybe you can make an argument that Holm outstruck Vieira in that round. No, because in this round it was, while Holm, I'm sorry, you can make an argument it's close in that round. I wouldn't say that Holm outstruck her. Vieira outstruck Holm because most of the strikes all the strikes that landed on Holm were all clean head strikes, while Holm's strikes were clinch strikes up until the very end, pretty much. And then that fifth round, which is the one that puts the icing on the cake, is Holm outstruck Vieira. Vieira kind of had her up in that first part of the fifth round, and then after that it was Holm. Holm finished it off. Now we look at the judges' scorecards. Mike Bell had it 48-47 Vieira. Derek Clearly also had it 48-47 Vieira, and then Saul D'Amato, who gets a lot of shit, but his scorecard reflects mine and probably a lot of people's. 48-47 for Holm. His scorecard reflects mine, but then Derek Clearly and Mike Bell, they give the first and the fifth to Holm. So the only thing they get wrong is the third round. So they give the third round to Vieira. In that third round, that's, I think, a very clear round for Holm. I'm very confused on how they gave that to Vieira. You know me. I think there's probably 3 videos of me whining and complaining about Parisian versus Martinez. I think it's Martinez, but it's a Parisian fight where, I'm sorry, not Parisian, Partisan. Partisan versus Martinez, where Partisan is holding someone in the clinch, but he's being outstruck in the clinch, and he wins the fight. That's essentially the theme of the fight. And 2 judges gave it to the person who is outstruck. I'm very confused. I'm actually very confused by that. But there's nothing else here to discuss other than that. It was an injustice. It's a robbery. Holm should have won the fight. And now we go to my favorite section, the honorable mentions, where I just complain and complain and complain and complain about individual rounds scored, but overall the person who won the fight, so it doesn't really matter. First honorable mention is Reed versus Hughes. This fight ended in a TKO for Hughes, but this fight ended in a TKO for Hughes, but in the first round I had a 10-9 for Reed, and then a 10-9 for Hughes in the second. Derek Clearly give the first round to Hughes. In fact, let me just speed it up. They get the honorable mention for me goes to all three judges. It's rare that I do that I think all three judges got the round incorrect, but all three judges got the round incorrect. I'll explain in a second. Derek Clearly, Ron McCarthy, and Jaron Villel gave the first round to Reed. Gave the first round to Hughes and the second round to Hughes, but I'm contesting the first one. In that very first round, Hughes got a takedown, but not only did Reed outstrike her on the feet, she was so active on the bottom. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Hughes landed a significant strike. Hell, I don't think she landed a decent strike while she was on top. That's how confident I am that she lost this round. So honorable mention to all three of those guys. I'm confused as to, even in my head I was thinking it. I was like, when I wrote down the scorecard, I'm like, hey, I hope these judges do the blah, blah, blah. It's funny because we'll get to a fight later on where a similar thing happens. And I can understand why they probably gave that to that certain person. But a similar thing happens, but they gave it to that person. But in this fight, they didn't. So whatever. We'll move on. Second honorable mention, Hooper versus Colares. Fight ends in a TKO for Hooper. I gave the first round to Hooper, 10-9 for Hooper. Second round, 10-9 for Colares. Mike Bell, his scorecard reflects mine. Adelaide Bird, her scorecard reflects mine. Saul D'Amato, honorable mention to Saul D'Amato. He gives a 10-9 to Hooper in the second round. Now, in that second round, Colares had 2 takedowns with ground and pound, a little bit of ground and pound. Hooper had some reversals and a submission attempt, but it's obvious that Colares did the most damage and was most effective in that round. So honorable mention there to Saul D'Amato. Next honorable mention, Morales versus Medic. Okay, this round was close. I'll be honest here. I had first scored this for Morales. Then I'd rewatched it. Then I scored it for Medic. But I put a close marker on it. Honestly, you could have given either person the round, but I lean towards Medic. So it's close. It was close on the feet with the edge to Medic. Mostly probably that strike at the end probably tilted me towards Medic. But if you look at all three judges, Mike Bell, he gave that first round to Medic. Jaron Villel gave that first round to Morales. Junior Camito gave that first round to Morales. So, I mean, honestly, you could kind of argue it in either direction. I guess I did in my head, but I also kind of didn't. So, there. No honorable mention to anybody. It's too close to call. Next honorable mention, Anders versus Park. This one fired me up a little bit. This happens occasionally. This one fired me up again. This was a split decision. I had this 30-27 for Park. Okay, this one fired me up because for one reason. Listen, I'm not the commentary guy. I'm not the guy that shits on the commentary. I like the commentary. Okay? 70-30, I like the commentary. But it sounded as though, not biased. That's not my thing. I'm not saying anyone's biased or anything. It just sounded as though they thought, just the way they were speaking, that Anders had won. And by round 2, I was just not convinced. You know, it seems to be there's this thing in MMA where if someone is really active or is portraying some sort of offense, that there's a perception that they're winning. When in fact, if your offense isn't effective, then you're not winning. A perfect example is this fight, Anders versus Park. I had this 30-27 for Park. I had this 30-27 for Park. And in the very first round, Anders had a takedown, but was outstruck by Park. This is the theme. It seems Anders was going for a takedown every single time, okay? And whether he would get it or not was irrelevant, but he didn't do anything with the takedowns, one, and two, he was outstruck on the feet. So that's why I gave Park the first round. Second round. This one, I think maybe you can argue for Anders. Maybe, but I didn't. Anders had 2 takedowns. Again, did nothing with them, but was still outstruck by Park. Third round. Park outstruck Anders. Fairly simple. Park outstruck is, I mean, there's no debate on that one. The judges' scorecards. Mike Bell gives the first 2 rounds to Anders. No. Honorable mention there for Mike Bell. He had it 29-28 for Anders. Anthony Manis had it 29-28 for Park. Here's what's goofy about these scorecards, right? Because in your head you're probably thinking, David, you have a 30-27. Why would you have a 30? Anthony Manis gives the first 2 rounds to Park, which I think is correct. Then gives the 3rd round to Anders. Absolutely goofy. Honorable mention there. Then we have a 29-28 for Park, Saul D'Amato. He gives the last 2 rounds to Park. This, honorable mention again, this doesn't make any sense, right? The last 2 rounds, I agree, go to Park. Why doesn't he give the first round to Park? If the first round is essentially just round 2 minus a takedown. It logically makes no sense to my ears. But anyways, all 3 of them get honorable mentions, but the winner still stands. Next honorable mention, we go to Viana versus Ricci. I had this 29-28 for Viana. Reason why it's not an honorable mention is because round 2 is a close round. You can kind of argue in either direction. That's how I felt at the time. Hence why I didn't put it in the honorable mention category. I gave the first 2 rounds to Viana. In the first round, it was close on the feet, but Ricci had 2 takedowns, but Viana was more active on the bottom. She was much more active on the bottom. So active that you give her the round, which is what I did. We go into round 2. Round 2, Ricci had 2 takedowns. Viana outstruck her and was more active on the ground, which is why I gave her the round again. But this one was close because Ricci had 2 takedowns. One of them was a hard takedown, one of them wasn't. And while Viana was more active on the ground than her, Ricci in this round actually gave a little bit of ground and pound, which is where you can get into the in-between of like who actually won the round, right? Which is why I put the close marker. Then in the 3rd round, Ricci had 2 takedowns to Viana's 1 takedown, and Ricci outstruck Viana, mostly leg kicks though. So that's 100% a round for Ricci. We look at the judges' scorecards. Mike Bell had it 29-28 for Ricci. Again, not going to say anything. Last 2 rounds for Ricci. Ron McCarthy reflects Mike Bell's scorecard, and the same for Adelaide Bird reflects the other 2 judges' scorecards. Here's where I'm gonna get pissed though. Okay, the first round they gave it to Viana. Same as my scorecard. If all 3 of them gave it to Viana, this round, in essence, kind of, it reminds me of round 1, Reed versus Hughes. Did any of these judges score that card? I'm going to look right now. No, none of them did. So, okay, I guess I won't blame them. I guess it just happens to be those certain judges don't see it that way. Got it. Understand. Well, there's that one. No one really got an honorable mention for that. that second round is close, so it doesn't really matter. Then we go to the last honorable mention, which is Ponzinibbio versus Pereira. There are probably some people who think this is a robbery. This ended in a split D. I had this 29-28 for Ponzinibbio. Put a close marker on the last round. I don't believe the UFC strike numbers. Excuse me, the UFC strike count on that third round. I'm not in agreement on that. 2 10-9s, so I give a 10-9 in the second and the third for Ponzinibbio. In the first round, Pereira outstruck Ponzinibbio. That's clear as day. Second round, it was kind of close on the feet, with the edge to Ponzinibbio. I felt he was kind of catching on later, and he got a takedown to kind of secure that round. So that round went to him. And then the third round, another close one on the feet. I gave the edge to Ponzinibbio. I felt as though he outstruck Pereira, hence why I thought he won the fight. But it's close. I think it's closer than the strike numbers kind of detail. We go to the judges' scorecards, where Mike Bell had it 29-28 for Pereira. He gave the first and the second to Pereira. I disagree wholeheartedly. I disagree with that one. Honorable mention there, mainly because of the second round. He gives the last round to Ponzinibbio. Ron McCarthy has it 30-27. Honorable mention, just off rip there again. Again, last round's close, but I don't agree with his second round scorecard. And then Junichiro Kamijo scores it for Ponzinibbio. His scorecard reflects mine. So that's all. Wild night of fights. I know when it happens this way, when the scorecards are all over the place, it sounds like a bad night of fights, but a lot of these fights are close. A lot of these rounds were close. So there's that. The only big true issue I probably have, if I'm just being honest, is that Reed Hughes round 1, the Holm fight. I mean, Holm won this. Holm won this fight, and I'm confused. And then the Park Anders fight, where it sounds as though they thought Anders won when he just didn't. So there's that. That's all I got. Thank you for listening, as always, and God bless.